The first time Damien Russo looked at me, I understood why powerful men never needed to raise their voices. Rain hammered against the windows of the diner like the whole city was trying to warn me to go home early that night. But my shift ended at 11:47 p.m., and rent in Brooklyn didn't care if I was tired. I tied my apron tighter, counted my tips twice, and ignored the strange feeling sitting heavy in my chest all evening. The diner was almost empty by then. One truck driver nursing cold coffee, a couple arguing in whispers near the jukebox, and me, wiping down counters beneath flickering neon lights that buzzed like dying insects. Then the black SUVs arrived. 3 of them, long silent, expensive enough to make the entire street feel poorer. Every conversation inside the diner stopped. Even the jukebox seemed quieter. I remember looking through the rain-streaked glass and seeing men in dark coats step onto the sidewalk with the kind of discipline that only came from fear or loyalty. Maybe both. And then he stepped out. Damien Russo. I didn't know his name yet, but somehow my body reacted before my brain did. The air changed around him. That's the only way I can explain it. Tall, broad shoulders beneath a charcoal overcoat. Black gloves. Dark hair brushed back like he had complete control over every inch of himself. He didn't look around like other rich men did. He expected the world to move for him, and somehow it did. One of the waitresses beside me whispered his name under her breath like a prayer she regretted saying out loud. That's Russo. My stomach tightened. Everybody in New York knew stories about the Russo family. You heard their name in low voices, in unfinished sentences, in warnings. Damien walked into the diner without rushing, rain sliding from his coat onto the black and white tile floor. Nobody looked directly at him for more than a second. Nobody except me. Big mistake. His eyes found mine instantly. Gray, cold, exhausted, like a man who hadn't slept peacefully in years. I looked away first. He sat alone in the back booth beneath the broken ceiling light. One of his men ordered coffee for him, but Damien never touched it. He just stared out the window while thunder rolled over the city skyline. And for some reason, I couldn't stop watching him either. There was something strange about powerful people when they were quiet. Dangerous men in movies always shouted. Damien didn't. He barely moved at all. But somehow everyone around him looked nervous breathing the same air. Around midnight, I took the trash out the back alley because Tony, the cook, claimed his knee hurt again. Rain soaked through my hoodie immediately. The alley behind the diner smelled like wet concrete and cigarette smoke. I almost missed the voices at first. Low, sharp, controlled. Then I heard Damien's voice. You lied to me. I froze near the dumpster, my pulse suddenly loud in my ears. I couldn't see much through the rain. Just silhouettes beneath a flickering security light. One standing still, one nervous. Then silence. Heavy silence. The kind that makes your instincts scream before your mind catches up. My sneakers scraped against gravel. Tiny sound. Barely anything. But every head turned toward me instantly. My breath stopped. One of the men reached inside his coat. Another cursed under his breath. And Damien Russo slowly looked directly at me through the rain like he already knew my life was about to change forever. People think fear feels loud. It does not. Real fear is quiet. It is the moment your heartbeat becomes the only thing you can hear while powerful men stare at you like they are deciding whether you still belong in this world. Rainwater dripped from my hair onto the concrete while nobody moved. I could barely breathe. One of Damien Russo's men stepped toward me first, his hand still hidden inside his coat. She saw too much, he muttered. Another man cursed under his breath. I remember backing up instinctively until my spine hit the cold brick wall behind me. There was nowhere to go. Damien stayed perfectly still beneath the flickering alley light. His gray eyes never left mine. Calm, empty, dangerous, like he had already lived through every terrible thing life could do to a person. Please, I whispered before I could stop myself. My voice sounded small, weak. The rain kept falling between us, softening the edges of the city until the whole alley looked unreal. One of the men moved closer again. Damien finally spoke. Enough. Just one word. Quiet. Controlled. But every man in the alley immediately stopped moving. That scared me more than shouting would have. Power always sounded softer than people expected. Damien glanced at me for another long second before walking forward slowly. Expensive black shoes against wet pavement. Black leather gloves. Not a single rushed movement. He stopped less than 2 feet away from me, and suddenly I understood why grown men lowered their eyes around him. Up close, he looked exhausted. Not weak. Never weak. Just tired in a way money could not fix. A faint scar crossed the edge of his jaw beneath the rain. His coat smelled like smoke and winter air. "What is your name?" he asked. I swallowed hard. "Claire." "Claire what?" "Claire Bennett." He studied my face like he was memorizing it. Then one of his men stepped closer again. "Boss, we cannot just let her walk away." Damien did not even look at him. "Did I ask for your opinion?" Silence. Immediate silence. The man backed away. My pulse would not slow down. I kept waiting for someone to tell me this was a mistake, that I was not leaving that alley alive. Damien removed one glove slowly, then checked the silver watch on his wrist like this entire moment was interrupting a much longer night. "You work at the diner?" he asked. I nodded carefully. "How long?" "Almost 2 years." "Do you live alone?" The question tightened something in my chest. "Why?" His expression never changed. "Because whether you understand it or not, Claire, your life changed tonight." Thunder rolled across the skyline. Somewhere nearby, a siren echoed through the rain. Damien glanced toward the street before looking back at me again. "Get in the car." Fear climbed higher into my throat. "I am not going anywhere with you." One of the men laughed softly like I had said something stupid. But Damien did not smile. He stepped closer instead, close enough that I could see tiny raindrops caught in his dark eyelashes. "You have 2 choices," he said calmly. "You get in the car with me willingly, or every dangerous person in this city learns there is a witness connected to my name." My stomach dropped, because somehow I believed him. Every word. He opened the SUV door himself and waited. No threats, no raised voice. Somehow that made it worse. I looked past him toward the empty street, toward the glowing diner sign across the rain, toward the normal life I suddenly realized I might never get back. Then I climbed into the car beside the most feared man in New York while the city disappeared behind dark, tinted windows. The inside of Damien Russo's SUV smelled like leather, cedarwood, and silence. The kind of silence rich people bought with power. Nobody spoke during the drive. Rain slid down the dark windows while Manhattan blurred into streaks of gold and white outside. I sat frozen beside the door, clutching my soaked hoodie sleeves so tightly my fingers hurt. Across from me, 2 men in black coats watched me carefully without saying a word. But Damien barely looked at me at all. He sat beside the opposite window, one hand resting near his watch while city lights flickered across the sharp angles of his face. Calm, untouchable, like bringing terrified strangers into luxury SUVs at midnight was just another Tuesday for him. Every few minutes his phone vibrated softly. He ignored most calls. The few times he answered, his voice dropped low enough that I could not hear the full conversation. Only fragments. No pause. I said she stays with me. Another pause. Then silence again. My stomach twisted harder every time he said the word she. I kept trying to understand why I was still alive. Men like Damien Russo did not leave loose ends. Everyone knew that. 25 minutes later, the SUV disappeared beneath a private underground garage lit with soft white lights. Expensive cars lined the concrete like pieces of modern art. The elevator doors opened before the vehicle fully stopped. 2 security guards immediately lowered their heads when Damien stepped out. Nobody looked surprised to see him, but they definitely looked surprised to see me. I followed him into the elevator because fear had a strange way of making decisions for you. Nobody spoke during the ride up. The elevator. Walls were mirrored, and I caught my reflection for the first time since leaving the diner. Wet blonde hair, smudged mascara, nervous eyes. I looked like someone who accidentally wandered into the wrong movie. Damien stood beside me, without moving, hands inside his coat pockets. His reflection looked colder than the real man somehow. The elevator opened directly into a penthouse, so beautiful it almost hurt to look at. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Manhattan like the entire city belonged to him. Black marble floors reflected warm golden lights overhead. Everything smelled faintly like expensive whiskey and clean linen. No family photos. No decorations. No signs that an actual human being lived there. Just perfection. Controlled perfection. One of the guards approached carefully. "Should I prepare the guest room?" Damien loosened his gloves slowly. "Yes. Guest room." The words hit me strangely. Not hostage room. Not basement. Guest room. I finally found enough courage to speak. "Why am I here?" Damien looked at me for the first time since the car ride ended. Those gray eyes were unreadable up close. Because too many people saw your face tonight. I did not do anything. That does not matter. His voice stayed calm, almost gentle. Somehow that made my pulse race harder. I crossed my arms tightly. So what now? I just stay here forever. One corner of his jaw tightened slightly. 30 days. What? You stay here 30 days. No phone calls. No work. No leaving without security. I stared at him in disbelief. You cannot seriously think I am agreeing to this. Damien stepped closer then. Not threatening. Not angry. Just close enough that I noticed the faint shadows beneath his eyes like sleep had abandoned him years ago. Claire, he said quietly, there are men in this city who would hurt themselves trying to impress me. If they discover a witness connected to my name. He let the sentence die there unfinished. He did not need to explain the rest. Fear already had. I looked away first. Again, one of the house staff quietly placed a folded blanket beside me before disappearing down the hallway. Nobody questioned Damien. Nobody hesitated around him. The entire penthouse moved like gravity changed whenever he entered a room. I hated how much that unsettled me. Damien removed his watch and placed it carefully on the marble counter. Midnight glowed across the skyline behind him. Get some sleep, he said. Tomorrow we discuss the rules. Then he started walking away. I should have stayed quiet. I should have kept my head down. But exhaustion and fear finally pushed the words out of me before I could stop them. Are you going to kill me after 30 days? Damien stopped walking instantly. The entire room felt colder. For a second, he did not move at all. Then slowly, without turning around, he answered in a voice so quiet it almost disappeared beneath the city noise outside. I have not decided yet. Luxury feels different when you are trapped inside it. I barely slept that first night in Damien Russo's penthouse. Every sound made my nerves tighten. The distant hum of elevators. Quiet footsteps somewhere beyond the hallway. Rain tapping softly against 40-foot windows overlooking Manhattan. Even the sheets felt too expensive to touch properly. The guest room alone was larger than my entire apartment in Brooklyn. Cream-colored walls. Soft gold lighting. Fresh flowers sitting beside the bed like somebody expected beauty to fix fear. It did not. I kept replaying his words in my head. I have not decided yet. Around 4 in the morning, I finally gave up trying to sleep. The city glowed outside the windows beneath low clouds and silver rain. New York never really rested. It just changed moods. I wrapped the blanket tighter around myself and quietly stepped into the hallway. The penthouse was silent. Almost unnaturally silent. Like nobody actually lived there. Then I noticed light beneath one of the doors near the far end of the apartment. I should have gone back to my room. Instead, curiosity pulled me forward one slow step at a time. The door was slightly open, just enough for me to see inside. Damien sat alone near the massive living room windows with a glass of whiskey untouched beside him. He had removed his suit jacket, and the sleeves of his white dress shirt were rolled halfway up his forearms. The city lights reflected across the marble floor around him, while soft jazz played quietly from somewhere nearby. He looked different without the coat and gloves. Still dangerous, still intimidating, but more human somehow. Tired in a way that made my chest ache unexpectedly. A laptop sat open in front of him beside several folders filled with documents. Numbers, maps, names. His entire world looked exhausting. Then I noticed the bruise near his wrist, dark against pale skin. Another faint mark near his collarbone where the open collar of his shirt shifted slightly. He rubbed a hand slowly across his face like the weight of the entire city lived behind his eyes. And for the first time since meeting him, Damien Russo looked alone. Completely alone. The floor creaked softly beneath my foot before I could stop it. His head lifted instantly, gray eyes locking onto mine with terrifying focus. Every trace of exhaustion vanished from his expression in seconds. Could not sleep? He asked calmly. I should have been afraid again. Instead, I felt embarrassed for catching him in a moment that looked almost vulnerable. I was thirsty, I lied. One corner of his mouth moved slightly. Not quite a smile. More like he recognized the lie and decided not to expose it. The kitchen is behind you. I nodded quickly and moved toward the marble counter, painfully aware of his eyes following me the entire time. The penthouse kitchen looked untouched, like nobody ever cooked there. Everything gleamed under warm recessed lighting. I filled a glass with water while trying not to shake. Do you always watch people that closely? I asked before thinking better of it. Silence. Then his voice behind me. Only when they are afraid. I turned slowly. Damien had not moved from his chair. The whiskey glass remained untouched beside him. You enjoy making people afraid? The question hung dangerously in the air. But Damien only studied me quietly for a few seconds before answering. No, his voice lowered slightly. But fear keeps people alive in my world. Something about the way he said my world unsettled me. Like he already understood I did not belong in it. I looked down at the untouched whiskey. You are not drinking it. His eyes flickered briefly toward the glass. I have not slept in 36 hours. Then why pour it? Another pause. Because sometimes people like the idea of something more than the thing itself. The answer felt deeper than whiskey somehow. I tightened my grip around the water glass. What exactly happens during these 30 days? Damien leaned back slowly in his chair, watching rain slide down the windows behind me. You stay close to me. You follow the rules. And you remain invisible. Invisible to who? His jaw tightened slightly. Everyone who would use you to reach me. A chill moved through me despite the warmth of the penthouse. Because for the first time, I realized something worse than being trapped by Damien Russo. Being important enough to become his weakness. By the third day, I realized Damien Russo did not live in his penthouse. He survived in it. There is a difference. Rich people usually fill silence with music or conversation or something human. Damien filled his with work, meetings, phone calls, endless security updates spoken in low voices behind closed doors. Men in dark suits came and went at all hours while the city stretched endlessly beneath the windows like a kingdom that never slept. And somehow, despite all that power around him, Damien always looked alone. I started noticing little things after that night in the kitchen. The untouched meals. The way his security team watched his mood before speaking. The permanent tension in his shoulders whenever his phone rang. Fear followed him everywhere, even inside his own home. One afternoon, I stood near the living room windows watching snow begin to fall over Manhattan when raised voices echoed faintly from his office. Damien rarely raised his voice himself, but everyone around him sounded nervous. She should not still be here, one man argued behind the door. People are already talking. Silence followed. Then Damien answered quietly enough that I almost missed it. Let them talk. The room went silent immediately after that. A few minutes later, the office door opened. 3 men walked out stiffly without looking at me. One of them glanced my way with open irritation before disappearing toward the elevator. Damien stepped out last, loosening the knot of his black tie with one hand. He looked exhausted again, gray shadows beneath his eyes. White dress, shirt slightly wrinkled near the sleeves. Powerful men in movies always looked polished. Real power looked tired. He noticed me standing near the windows. You should eat something. I crossed my arms. You barely eat anything yourself. His gaze lingered on me for a second too long before he looked away. That is different. Why? Because I am used to this life. Snow drifted slowly outside while silence settled between us again. Strange how quickly silence became normal around him. I studied his face carefully. Those men were talking about me. It was not a question. Damien adjusted the cuff of his sleeve calmly. People in my world dislike uncertainty. And I am uncertainty. You are a complication. The honesty should have offended me. Instead, it made my chest tighten unexpectedly. Because Damien Russo never sounded cruel when he spoke to me. Just honest. Brutally honest. I moved toward the kitchen island slowly. Then why keep me here? He looked at me then. Really looked at me. Not like a hostage. Not even like a problem. Something else. Something heavier. Because if you leave before I solve this, he said quietly, you become vulnerable. I frowned. To who? His jaw tightened slightly. Men who think hurting innocent people is useful. The words settled heavily in the room. Innocent people. Somehow hearing Damien Russo say that made my stomach twist. A phone vibrated sharply against the marble counter. Damien glanced down at the screen, and for the first time since meeting him, I watched his expression darken instantly. Not anger. Something colder. Dangerous. He answered immediately. What happened? Silence. Then another long pause while snow continued falling outside the windows behind him. I could not hear the voice on the other end, but I saw Damien's entire posture change. Controlled. Alert. His eyes slowly lifted toward me while the caller kept speaking. When? He asked quietly. Another pause. Then his gaze hardened in a way that made my pulse stumble. Do not touch him until I arrive. He ended the call without another word. The room suddenly felt too small. What happened? I asked carefully. Damien slipped his watch back onto his wrist with practiced precision. Someone was asking questions about a waitress from Brooklyn. My stomach dropped instantly. He looked directly at me then, colder than I had ever seen him before. Claire, he said softly, did you tell anyone where you were before I found you? I did not answer Damien immediately because suddenly every mistake I had made over the last 72 hours felt enormous. The penthouse seemed quieter than ever while snow drifted outside the windows in slow motion. Damien stood across from me near the marble counter, waiting. Calm. Still. But there was tension underneath that calm now, sharp enough to cut through the room. I tried swallowing the knot in my throat. I did not tell anyone where I was, I said carefully. Not exactly. His gray eyes narrowed slightly. Claire. My pulse stumbled. My roommate texted me the night I disappeared. Damien stayed silent. That somehow felt worse than anger. And he asked quietly. I answered once. I hated how small my voice sounded. I just told her I was safe. The muscle near Damien's jaw tightened instantly. He looked away toward the city skyline for a brief second like he was calculating something dangerous inside his head. Did you mention me? No, the diner. No. Anything connected to that night? No, he exhaled slowly through his nose. But the tension in the room never eased. Damien picked up his phone again and typed something quickly before setting it back down. What does this mean? I asked. It means somebody started looking for you faster than they should have. Fear crept higher into my chest again. You think my roommate told someone? I think people become careless when they are scared. His voice stayed calm, controlled. And scared people talk. Snow continued falling behind him while Manhattan glowed silver beneath the storm clouds. I wrapped my arms tighter around myself. I should call her. No, the answer came instantly. Sharp enough to stop me cold. Damien stepped. Closer then, not threatening, but intense in a way that made my heartbeat speed up anyway. From this moment forward, you do not contact anyone unless I approve it first. You cannot control every part of my life. His expression darkened slightly. Actually, Claire, right now I can. The honesty hit harder than cruelty would have. I looked away first. Again, silence stretched between us before Damien's phone vibrated once more. He glanced down at the screen, and something in his eyes shifted immediately. Colder. More focused. I need to leave for a few hours, he said. You stay here. Am I a prisoner now? You became a target the second someone connected your name to mine. The words settled heavily inside my chest. Target. Not witness anymore. Not complication. Something worse. Damien reached for the black wool coat draped across the chair beside him. Even exhausted, even frustrated, every movement he made looked controlled. Disciplined. Like he had spent his entire life learning how never to lose control in front of other people. There will be security outside your door, he continued. Do not leave the penthouse. And if I do? He looked directly at me while buttoning his coat slowly. Then I cannot protect you. Something about the way he said protect made my stomach twist unexpectedly. Because Damien Russo never promised comfort. Never promised kindness. Only survival. The elevator doors opened at the far end of the penthouse as two men stepped inside. One of them was older, broad-shouldered, with silver threaded through dark hair and the kind of expression that immediately disliked me. His eyes moved over me once before turning to Damien. This is becoming a problem, the older man said bluntly. Damien's entire posture changed slightly. Colder. Not now, Victor. People are talking. Victor glanced toward me again with visible disapproval. They think you are distracted. Silence flooded the penthouse. Dangerous silence. Damien walked toward him slowly, adjusting the cuff of his coat. And what do you think? Victor hesitated. Just for a second. I think she should disappear before someone uses her against you. The room felt ice cold instantly. My pulse hammered painfully against my ribs. But Damien did not look at me. He kept his eyes locked on Victor while answering in a voice so calm it almost frightened me more than yelling would have. Anyone who touches Claire Bennett answers to me personally. Even Victor went silent after that. And for the first time since entering Damien's world, I realized something terrifying. The most dangerous thing about powerful men was not their anger. It was the people willing to obey them. After Damien left the penthouse, silence settled over the rooms like heavy snowfall. The city outside looked soft and beautiful beneath the storm, but inside, everything felt tense. Waiting. Even the security guards near the elevator barely moved. One stood outside the hallway leading to my room, while another remained near the entrance with an earpiece pressed against his collar. Nobody smiled in Damien Russo's world. People only watched. I tried reading, tried sleeping, tried convincing myself this situation would somehow end normally. But every few minutes I replayed Victor's words in my head. She should disappear before someone uses her against you. I hated how easily people talked about human beings around Damien, like lives were business problems waiting to be solved. Around 9 that night, I wandered back into the kitchen searching for coffee mostly because the silence was making me restless. Snow continued falling outside the windows, turning Manhattan into a blur of white and gold lights. The penthouse still looked untouched. Perfect. Empty. Then I noticed something strange near the edge of the marble island. A photograph. I frowned slightly and picked it up carefully. It showed a younger Damien standing beside an older man in front of a small Italian restaurant somewhere in Brooklyn. Damien looked different. Maybe 19 or 20. Still serious, but softer around the eyes somehow. Human. The older man beside him had one hand resting on Damien's shoulder proudly. Family, probably. I stared at the photo longer than I should have. He hated cameras. Damien's voice behind me startled me badly enough that I nearly dropped the frame. I turned quickly. He had returned without me. Hearing the elevator. Snow melted slowly across the shoulders of his black coat, while exhaustion carved deeper shadows beneath his eyes than before. But something else lingered there too tonight. Anger. Quiet anger. Sorry, I said quickly, setting the photo back down. Damien removed his gloves slowly. You can look at it. His voice sounded tired again. He walked toward the kitchen island and loosened his tie with one hand before pouring himself coffee instead of whiskey this time. Your father? I asked carefully, nodding toward the picture. Damien glanced at the frame for a long moment. No, he stirred sugar into the coffee absently. He owned the restaurant where I worked when I was younger. You worked in a restaurant? The question escaped before I could stop it. One corner of his mouth moved faintly again. Not quite amusement. Surprising? A little. Damien leaned one hand against the marble counter. Not everyone is born powerful, Claire. The way he said powerful sounded almost bitter. I studied him quietly beneath the warm kitchen lights. Snowflakes still melted slowly in his dark hair. He looked colder tonight somehow. More distant. Did you find out who was asking about me? Silence. He lifted the coffee cup, but never drank from it. Yes. My chest tightened immediately. And his gray eyes found mine again. Someone connected to another family heard rumors that I was protecting a witness. Witness. The word hurt strangely now. Like we had moved beyond it without speaking about it directly. What happens if they find me? Damien stayed quiet for a second too long. Then finally, nothing good. The honesty in his voice made my stomach twist again. I looked down at the marble floor. I never asked for any of this. I know. Quiet. Immediate. I glanced back up at him, surprised by how genuine those two words sounded. Damien rubbed tiredly at the bridge of his nose before speaking again. Victor believes sending you away would solve the problem. And you? Silence stretched between us while soft jazz drifted quietly from hidden speakers somewhere in the penthouse. Damien stepped closer slowly. Not enough to scare me. Just enough that I noticed how carefully controlled every movement around him always was. I think, he said quietly, that the second you leave this building, someone will try to use you against me. My pulse stumbled. Against me. Not because of what I saw. Because of him. Because somehow, without understanding when it happened, Damien Russo had started seeing my safety as personal. Then his phone vibrated again. He glanced down at the screen, and for the first time since meeting him, I watched real emotion crack through his calm expression. Not anger. Not exhaustion. Fear. He answered immediately. What do you mean she is missing? The fear in Damien Russo's voice lasted less than 2 seconds. Then it disappeared behind control again. But I had already heard it. Who took her? He asked quietly into the phone. His entire body had gone still beside the kitchen island. Dangerous stillness. The kind that comes before storms. I watched his gray eyes darken while the person on the other end kept talking. When was the last contact? Silence. Then another pause. Damien closed his eyes briefly, like he was forcing himself to stay calm. Find her before anyone else does. He ended the call and immediately grabbed his coat again. My chest tightened. Who was missing? He looked at me for a long second before answering. Your roommate. Cold rushed through my stomach instantly. Emily. Damien nodded once. Her apartment was empty when my men arrived. Panic hit so fast it almost made me dizzy. Oh my God. I reached for my phone instinctively before remembering it had been taken days ago. This is my fault. No, Damien's answer came sharp and immediate. This is my world. The words hung heavily between us. I stared at him while fear clawed higher into my chest. If somebody took her because of me, do not finish that sentence. His voice stayed controlled, but something underneath it sounded close to anger now. Not at me, at himself. Damien moved toward the living room windows, already dialing another number. Snow spiraled outside behind him, while Manhattan glowed beneath the storm like a city pretending to be beautiful. Lock down every building connected to Russo property, he ordered coldly. Into the phone. Nobody enters or leaves without my approval. The man I had seen in rare, quiet moments vanished completely. This version of Damien looked untouchable, ruthless, the reason powerful men lowered their eyes around him. He ended the call and turned back toward me. Pack a bag. I blinked in confusion. What? You are not staying here tonight. Fear tightened my throat again. Where are we going? Somewhere safer. The way he said safer terrified me because the penthouse already felt impossible to reach. If even Damien Russo believed we needed to move, then things were worse than I realized. I hurried toward the guest room, while security guards suddenly flooded the penthouse with tense energy. Men spoke quietly into earpieces. Elevator doors opened and closed constantly now. Somebody handed Damien another phone. Another man whispered something that immediately hardened his expression further. The entire apartment felt like it was bracing for impact. I shoved clothes into a small bag with shaking hands while my thoughts spiraled wildly around Emily. Sweet, loud, completely innocent Emily who cried during dog food commercials and once drove 40 minutes just because my car battery died. She did not belong anywhere near Damien's world. None of this was supposed to touch her. A soft knock sounded at the open guest room door. I turned quickly. Damien stood there watching me silently. Black coat back on, gloves in one hand, gray eyes unreadable again. My men will find her, he said quietly. I wanted to believe him, but fear made everything feel fragile now. You do not know that. Something shifted across his expression then. Brief, almost painful. I do not lose people under my protection. The sentence hit me harder than it should have. Under my protection. Not custody. Not responsibility. Protection. Damien glanced toward the hallway as voices echoed near the elevator again. We need to move. I zipped the bag quickly and followed him through the penthouse. The moment the elevator doors opened downstairs, freezing air swept through the underground garage. Black SUVs waited with engines running while snow whipped sideways through the open entrance. Beyond the security gates, men moved fast around us, tense and alert. Damien placed one hand lightly against my lower back as he guided me toward the nearest vehicle. The touch lasted barely a second. Careful, protective, but somehow it made my pulse stumble harder than fear itself. Then one of the guards near the front SUV suddenly spoke into his earpiece, his face draining of color almost instantly. Boss, he said carefully, looking toward Damien. There is a problem. Damien's expression turned cold immediately. What now? The guard hesitated. Somebody sent a photo to the main office 10 minutes ago. Snow swirled violently through the garage entrance while silence settled around us. What photo? Damien asked quietly. The guard swallowed hard. A picture of Claire leaving the diner with you that night. The moment the guard mentioned the photo, the entire garage seemed to freeze. Snow whipped through the open entrance while every man around Damien Russo went silent at once. I looked from the guard to Damien, my pulse suddenly hammering so hard it hurt. What photo? I asked quietly. Nobody answered me. The guard handed Damien his phone carefully, almost nervously. Damien studied the screen without changing expression, but I noticed the subtle tightening in his jaw immediately. Controlled anger. The dangerous kind. After a few seconds, he turned the phone toward me. My stomach dropped. It was me, standing outside the diner beneath the rain 3 nights earlier while Damien guided me toward the SUV. The image was grainy, taken from across the street, but our faces were visible enough. Worse than visible. Personal. His hand against my back. His attention completely focused on me. The photo looked intimate in a way that made panic crawl higher into my chest. Who took this? I whispered. That is what I intend to find out. Damien handed the phone back to the guard before opening the SUV door for me himself. Get inside. His voice stayed calm, but the tension underneath it was impossible to miss now. I climbed into the vehicle while snow spiraled violently around the garage lights. Damien entered beside me a second later, and the convoy immediately pulled into the storm. Nobody spoke for several minutes. The city outside looked colder than ever tonight. White snow, black streets, endless lights reflecting across frozen pavement. Damien sat beside me staring out the tinted window with that same distant look powerful men wore when they were trying not to lose control. Finally, I forced myself to speak. This changes everything, does it not? Silence. Then his quiet voice beside me. Yes. Fear tightened painfully in my throat. People are going to think. I could not finish the sentence. Damien looked at me then. Really looked at me. People already think too much. Because of that picture. Because I brought you into my world alive. The honesty hit harder than I expected. Snow continued falling heavily across Manhattan while the SUV moved deeper into the city. Where are we going? I asked softly. Somewhere nobody will think to look. His phone vibrated again. Damien glanced down briefly before answering. Talk. His voice turned colder instantly. I watched his expression carefully while the person on the other end spoke rapidly. Then suddenly Damien went completely still beside me. Every trace of exhaustion vanished from his face. Say that again. My stomach twisted immediately. Silence filled the SUV except for the soft hiss of tires against snow-covered streets. Then Damien slowly lowered the phone from his ear. What happened? I asked carefully. He stared forward for a long second before answering. Your roommate was found. Relief crashed through me so fast it almost hurt. Oh, thank God. But Damien did not look relieved. Not even close. Claire. His voice softened slightly. She was carrying an envelope with your name on it. My heartbeat stumbled. What? Damien reached into his coat slowly and removed a thick cream-colored envelope folded at the edges from melted snow. He handed it to me carefully. My fingers shook as I opened it. Inside was a single photograph. Not recent. Old. At least 15 years old. The image showed a younger version of Damien standing outside the same small Italian restaurant from the framed picture I had